A 7.6 magnitude earthquake just tore through the northeastern coast of Japan, and the immediate aftermath has been nothing short of chaos. Violent shaking rocked cities and rural towns alike, knocking out power, halting transit, and forcing thousands to evacuate in a rush toward higher ground. The quake didn't just hit, it roared to life from the depths of the Japan Trench, that infamous subduction zone that sits.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
It's like a loaded spring beneath the Pacific Ring of Fire. This wasn't some distant offshore rumble. This was the kind of seismic force that rattles windows in one city and shatters them in another. Infrastructure took a direct hit, streets cracked, buildings suffered visible damage, boats capsized in port, and emergency services had to act within seconds to prevent an even worse catastrophe. Immediately after the quake, tsunami alerts were activated. This is where the training kicked in. Residents living along the coast knew the drill literally. Sirens blared. Alerts flashed across screens. And within moments, thousands of people were on the move, heading away from danger zones and up towards safety. Sea level gauges began detecting tsunami surges of up to 50 centimeters. That might sound small, but in a densely populated country built close to the water, even a half-meter surge can sink boats, flood harbors, and destroy fragile infrastructure. All of this is happening in a country that's painfully familiar with what these events can spiral into. The memory of the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami is still etched into the national psyche. That disaster, with a magnitude of 9.0, caused widespread destruction and a nuclear crisis. This time, the quake wasn't as large, but it didn't have to be. Japan's coastline is vulnerable, and even a 7.6 is strong enough to trigger alarms at every level of society. The source of the earthquake was no mystery. It was the Japan Trench again. This underwater fault line is one of the most dangerous places on the planet, where the Pacific Plate dives beneath the North American Plate at about 8 centimeters per year. That slow-motion collision creates extreme geological stress, and eventually, the pressure releases. That's when disaster strikes. And that's exactly what happened here. Aftershocks followed within hours, some as strong as magnitude 6. These weren't just background tremors. They were forceful enough to rattle already damaged structures and cause even more fear. Rescue operations became more dangerous. Emergency crews had to keep working while the ground beneath them kept shifting. The people in affected areas had no choice but to brace for the next shock, unsure when or where it would come. Japan's meteorological agency responded in full force, deploying advanced modeling tools and tide gauges to monitor real-time data and confirm tsunami threats. Their systems are among the most sophisticated in the world. That technology doesn't just send alerts, it shapes evacuation plans, directs emergency teams, and helps predict how the disaster might evolve. Still, despite the preparation, there were gaps. The earthquake exposed weaknesses in coastal infrastructure again. Seawalls cracked. Streets split. Power went out in wide areas. The quake overturned boats, damaged port facilities, and disrupted transportation systems. Some urban and rural zones struggled to maintain communication networks in the critical minutes after the quake. It's a hard truth that even in one of the most prepared countries on Earth, there's no such thing as earthquake-proof. And this isn't just about buildings and boats. It's about people. Communities had to leave everything behind: homes, businesses, schools, and flee toward safety with only minutes of warning. Shelters filled quickly. Emergency supply chains had to be activated. Local governments coordinated with national agencies to secure food, water, and temporary housing. And through it all, aftershocks kept coming, leaving survivors with no sense of stability. This is where Japan's long history of seismic disasters becomes both a burden and a benefit. The trauma of past events, especially the 2011 catastrophe, has shaped national policy. Building codes are stricter. Public education on disaster response is a priority. Schools, hospitals, and even convenience stores have protocols for earthquakes and tsunamis. People are trained to move fast, not wait. That level of awareness has likely saved countless lives once again. Still, there's a harsh reality behind all of this. Preparedness doesn't eliminate risk. It only manages it. And when the Earth moves with this kind of intensity, even the best plans can be tested to the breaking point. That's why this latest event is more than just another data point, it's a wake-up call, again, that reinforces just how urgent continued investment in infrastructure and monitoring systems really is. Engineers and disaster response teams are now on the ground, assessing the damage. They're inspecting seawalls, bridges, buildings, and utility lines. They're also watching the stress along the fault line, monitoring for more seismic activity. Every aftershock adds new strain. Every cracked building could become unstable. The focus right now is on safety, but the work won't stop there. This is a long-term recovery effort. The quake also shut down major parts of urban infrastructure. Power outages left thousands in the dark. Transit systems stopped cold. Some regions lost access to clean water. In a country as technologically advanced as Japan, these kinds of disruptions are a clear sign of how even advanced systems can break down when nature decides to pull the plug. What stands out most, though, is the way communities pulled together. People evacuated quickly. Emergency drills weren't just theory, they were real, practiced, and effective. Communication channels, even under stress, stayed open. Emergency shelters welcomed evacuees. Local and national agencies coordinated closely. This wasn't just government response, it was community resilience in motion. At the same time, this quake is part of a larger pattern. Japan's position on the Pacific Ring of Fire means that seismic events aren't rare, they're expected. This region is one of the most geologically active on the planet. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis are part of the landscape. And with climate change, urban sprawl, and increasing coastal populations, the risks only grow more complex. The data coming in from tide gauges, satellites, and seismic sensors isn't just for immediate response, it's for the future. It helps scientists understand fault behavior. It informs where to reinforce infrastructure. It tells planners where to invest in mitigation strategies. Because the next quake is inevitable. The only question is how ready we'll be when it comes. This recent quake is already sparking comparisons to 2011. And while the scale this time is smaller, the implications are still serious. Even moderate tremors can create ripple effects literally and figuratively. Flooded neighborhoods, displaced families, damaged supply chains, all of these become long-term problems that don't end when the shaking stops. Military and emergency response forces were mobilized fast. Helicopters surveyed damage from above. Ground teams moved through affected zones to rescue people and deliver supplies. Coordination between different sectors, rescue, medical, engineering, was rapid and efficient. Japan's emergency planning model, while under pressure, held up under one of the toughest kinds of tests. Looking ahead, there's going to be even more scrutiny on infrastructure. Are seawalls tall enough? Are roads reinforced for landslides? Are buildings really compliant with seismic standards? These aren't academic questions anymore, they're urgent priorities. Especially in areas where past warnings were ignored, or funding for upgrades was delayed. The message from this earthquake is painfully clear. The threat is real. It's constant. And while Japan continues to lead in monitoring and preparedness, there's no room for complacency. Every structure, every response plan, every evacuation route has to be maintained, tested, and upgraded. Because the ground beneath this region never really stops moving. This event isn't just about Japan, it's a global case study. Countries around the world that sit along fault lines are watching. The systems that worked, the ones that faltered, the community responses, all of it matters far beyond Japan's borders. This is what preparedness looks like under pressure. If you found this coverage valuable, don't forget to like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more breakdowns like this. Let's keep the conversation going because staying informed is part of staying safe. Right now, in cities and towns across northeastern Japan, the cleanup is just beginning, but the ground hasn't really settled. That's the problem with earthquakes like this. The initial shock is only the beginning. What follows is a long and complicated chain reaction of logistics, fear, rebuilding, and recalibration. This magnitude 7.6 quake wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a full-scale stress test for every level of preparedness Japan has spent decades building. And let's be honest, it wasn't a pass-fail situation. Some systems held, some strained, some cracked. Just like the roads now splitting through coastal neighborhoods and the seawalls that buckled under pressure. Japan has long accepted that its geography comes with high-stakes geological risk, but every time the Earth strikes back, that gamble becomes brutally real. The evacuation process, though, was a defining moment. Coastal populations didn't hesitate. They moved inland with urgency. This wasn't panic. It was muscle memory. Generations raised with the understanding that you don't wait for confirmation, you respond to the warning. It's why tsunami alerts were treated seriously the second they dropped, even when early wave heights didn't look catastrophic. Because it only takes one unexpected surge to level everything in its path. Some sea level gauges clocked waves around 50 centimeters, which, on paper, might seem manageable. But this isn't about dramatic Hollywood tsunamis swallowing skyscrapers. It's about powerful ocean surges slamming into fragile docks, flooding low-lying zones, capsizing vessels, and tearing through infrastructure that was never meant to withstand constant seismic punishment. Harbors, ports, coastal rail lines, they're all vulnerable in moments like this. And while Japan has some of the best monitoring tech on Earth, seismographs, tide gauges, satellite data, modeling systems, the reality is that none of it stops the disaster. It just gives people a fighting chance to stay ahead of it. The Meteorological Agency wasted no time. Their systems kicked into gear, and those alerts gave communities precious minutes. Enough time to run, to act, to survive. But for all the advancements, this earthquake still laid bare some serious vulnerabilities. Power outages were widespread. Urban and rural systems alike went dark. Emergency services scrambled to restore access to communication, water, and heat, especially critical in regions where cold weather adds another layer of risk. And when you think about how interconnected everything is, how power failures affect hospitals, transit, and emergency shelters, it's easy to see how quickly these moments spiral into prolonged emergencies. Infrastructure bore the brunt. Seawalls that were supposed to act as first-line defenses didn't all hold up. Cracks appeared in key roadways. Some utility lines were knocked out entirely. Boats were tossed around like toys in port areas. There's no other way to say coastal resilience is still a work in progress. And after this quake, that work just became even more urgent. Even now, engineers and inspectors are walking through impacted zones, noting the damage, testing for structural integrity, identifying buildings that could collapse if another aftershock rolls through. And those aftershocks, still coming. Some have been strong enough magnitude 4.6 to send fresh waves of fear through already devastated communities. These aren't just psychological aftershocks. They carry real danger. And while the immediate focus is safety, getting people out of unsafe structures, stabilizing roads, restoring power, there's also the bigger, looming question: how do you plan for the next one? Because there will be a next one. Japan's position along the Pacific Ring of Fire guarantees it. The tectonic activity here is relentless. The Pacific Plate continues its descent beneath the North American Plate at about 8 centimeters per year, storing massive amounts of energy in the process. That energy has to go somewhere. And when it does, it explodes in events like this. The Japan Trench, where this quake originated, is among the most closely watched subduction zones in the world. It's the same region responsible for the 2011 disaster. That quake was larger, magnitude 9.0, but the warning from today is no less urgent. Magnitude isn't everything. A slightly smaller quake can still be deadly, especially if the timing, depth, and proximity to shore all line up to make things worse. That's why preparedness is non-negotiable here. Japan's national strategy includes reinforced building codes, real-time public alerts, and community-level drills. People know evacuation routes. They're taught what to do from an early age. That's why so many were able to evacuate safely this time. It's not just science, it's culture. Earthquake resilience is part of everyday life. But culture alone isn't enough. The quake made it clear that even well-prepared communities are only as strong as the infrastructure they rely on. And as sea levels rise and population density increases in coastal regions, the margin for error shrinks. You can't rely on systems built decades ago to withstand disasters shaped by today's climate and urban sprawl. Right now, local officials and national leaders are facing difficult conversations. Where do we reinforce first? Which regions get upgraded defenses? How do you balance budgets when you're planning for a disaster that hasn't happened yet but absolutely will? These aren't just academic questions. They're decisions with life or death consequences. And this isn't just a national issue, it's international. Other countries along the Ring of Fire are watching. Chile, Indonesia, New Zealand, California. Japan sets the standard for earthquake preparedness. So when Japan takes a hit like this, everyone else pays attention. The tech, the response time, the community coordination, these are the lessons being studied in boardrooms and emergency planning offices around the world. This quake also raises the alarm again about aftershock dynamics. Every time the stress redistributes along the fault line, the possibility of another major rupture increases. That's why scientists are now analyzing how this event may have impacted other zones along the trench. Could it trigger a chain reaction? Could a secondary quake hit an even more vulnerable area? These are very real questions. Meanwhile, in evacuation shelters, the human impact is playing out in slow motion. Families are huddled together, unsure when they can return home or if they even have a home to go back to. Supply chains are strained. Food, water, and medical resources have to be delivered to isolated regions. Emergency teams are stretched thin. It's not just a geological event, it's a humanitarian one. And still, people endure. That quiet resilience is everywhere. Volunteers showing up to help. Neighbors sharing resources. Children comforting each other while adults rebuild what they can. It's the unspoken strength of a country that has survived countless disasters and will survive this one, too. But make no mistake, the work is only beginning. Once the headlines fade and the sirens go quiet, the long-term recovery begins. That means retrofitting infrastructure, rebuilding homes, reviewing evacuation maps, rethinking engineering assumptions. Because survival isn't just about what you do during a quake, it's about what you change after it. This earthquake wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a much bigger story, one where natural forces collide with human planning, and the outcome depends on how well we've listened to past warnings. The 2011 disaster taught Japan hard lessons. This one is reminding the world that there's still more work to do. And that's the takeaway. No matter how advanced the system, no matter how strong the structures, nature will keep testing the limits. What matters is how we respond, how we prepare, and how we support the communities that bear the brunt of it. As the dust settles and the aftershocks taper, at least for now, the reality is setting in. This was a brutal reminder of how fragile stability really is in a country perched on the edge of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Japan didn't just experience a natural event, it endured a direct confrontation with the forces beneath its own foundation. And while the systems mostly held, the scars are visible. In cracked seawalls, in buckled roads, in the silent harbor towns now waiting for recovery crews. But the deeper impact, it's in the unease people now carry with them, because when the ground beneath you proves it can't be trusted, nothing feels truly solid. Yet somehow, even through all of this, Japan doesn't break. It recalibrates. It learns. Every sensor reading, every evacuation route tested, every fault line shift, those become data points. Not just for scientists, but for mayors, planners, and citizens who understand that normal here always exists one tremor away from collapse. And so, the question isn't if this will happen again, it's how ready Japan, and the rest of us, will be when it does. Because earthquakes don't care about timelines or forecasts. They come when they want, and they always leave something behind. If you want to keep up with stories that matter, stories where preparedness meets reality, go ahead and hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe. What happened in Japan isn't just news. It's a warning. One that we should all be paying attention to.